This is the Water Foresight Podcast, powered by the Aqualaris Group, where we anticipate, frame, and shape the future of water through strategic foresight. Today's guest is Mahesh Lunani, who is the founder and CEO of Aquasight, a pioneering company specializing in intelligent water solutions. Mahesh is a graduate of the General Manager program at Harvard Business School and holds degrees in mechanical, manufacturing, and industrial engineering. Mahesh, welcome to the Water Foresight Podcast.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it, and I really look forward to the conversation.
Well, wonderful. Mahesh, tell us a little bit about Aquasight and your leadership of the organization.
Yeah. So Aquasight is based out of the U.S. We have built a real-time AI, artificial intelligence infrastructure for the full water cycle. What that means is that our systems and solutions can consume any kind of data sets that utilities are producing, and they're producing in terabytes of information, and consume it through our solution and technology, and provide very actionable advice on how they can reduce energy, reduce chemicals, minimize leaks, understand where the water quality problem is going to be, where the sewer is going to overflow, the impact of rain on the design storms for their sewer system, risk of their assets, and how infectious diseases like COVID are spreading underground. So there's a whole slew of stuff that our technology does. And we have rolled this out in 100 plus communities. We partnered with a variety of different companies to scale what we're doing, from sensor manufacturers to engineering firms, and obviously directly with utilities. We work quite a bit of this. So, and that's who the company is. I run the company. I founded the company. And we have an amazing set of team members that aspire to make a huge difference in the role of technology to transform how utility business gets done today.
Wonderful. I appreciate that overview. A lot of things in that overview that are very important to leaders in the world of water. I want to talk today about ChatGPT. It has hit the news. Seems that everybody's talking about it. Seems that people are trying to figure out what it is. Tell us a little bit about what is ChatGPT and where did it come from?
Yeah, so, there is a huge amount of excitement in the last 3 to 6 months on this topic. It is actually a chatbot. It is a large language model, which essentially produces text that looks like it has come from humans. So it's almost like you're speaking to God or speaking to a superhuman. It's been developed by OpenAI, which is a nonprofit entity. And the technology behind this has been researched for the last 10 years. So it's not something that they developed it in the last 1 year and hit the streets now. There's some deep work done in the space. And it's based on what's called transformer neural network. It's kind of the way you program a model based on sequential data, and it parses the sequential data so he understands every text and words, and then he can put them together in ways when you ask the question. And the training, what is really important here is what's been trained on. It's been trained on world's knowledge, everything you can think about. And the reason the excitement about this is in the first 2 months of its public free launch, they've accumulated 100 million users. And you compare that to Instagram, which took 2 to 2.5 years to get there. And so that's the excitement an average person is having around ChatGPT and its potential.
Wow. I know enough to be dangerous, but it sounds like what we see on science fiction movies with, Captain Picard talking to the computer, and the computer is capable enough of doing certain things. And here we are today in 2023, and we have ChatGPT. Is ChatGPT another incremental step in advances within AI? Or am I wrong or right? Tell me about that.
I think it's, I would call it the next generation level. As I mentioned, almost like a superhuman that knows it all. And because the consumers are experiencing what AI can do at its early stages, this is like beyond Siri, which is a voice-to-text response to simple commands, or an Amazon recommendation engine that tells you what you should be or you like to shop. So I view this as really a generational change, and that's the way the market is also responding to it. In fact, what is really fascinating, 2 days ago, ChatGPT 4 was launched. Yeah. And that also tells you the pace at which these new models and new versions are able to be deployed. And in this version 4, there is a higher level of code generation, software code that it can generate, including Python. You can read images and contextualize it, and you can have conversations around the images, what they call multimodal. It can generate outputs up to 25,000 words. And I'll talk about some of these very interesting potential applications. It's integrated with the Bing search engine, and it's operating with remarkable speeds and a much higher level of capability. So the pace at which the model itself is evolving and what the model is able to do, I would not call it an incremental step. I would call it a generational change.
Transformational. Yeah. What I've seen, to your point about the new version of ChatGPT, I've even here and there seen articles by university administrators saying, hey, students, you're not to use ChatGPT to write your term papers. There are certain conversations happening around just how unique, transformational, and viable ChatGPT is. And it seems that there are personal applications, but there's also what we might consider to be business applications. In your view, how does ChatGPT work within organizations today?
Yes, we're still learning every day. It's fairly new, right? But I would say with any technology like this, in this case, it gets hit with a great B2C, then it moves to B2B, then it moves to B2G, right? But I see that both B2C and B2B are exploring this quite rapidly. But, things, for example, if you don't want to do copywriting, you normally, what do you do today? If you are head of marketing, you tell your copywriting person, I need something with these 5 main themes. Well, you can throw those themes into ChatGPT and start having conversations with it, or have it produce a post or copyright article for you, right? May not be 100% what you want, but it can get you 90%.
Yeah.
That's one area. It can analyze large texts and get you summaries, right? So if I'm a CEO and I don't have the time to read through tons of stuff, and you want a summary of it, instead of telling someone, you can post this text and ask it to do a summary. By the way, each one of these examples I'm sharing right now, I've actually myself done it and experimented with it, right? Creative designs. The other day, we needed a design that had certain elements of it, and we threw it in there. Now, this is not ChatGPT in of itself. There is a DALL-E, which is a totally separate part of the OpenAI, and it produced a design that we could accept after 20 different iterations. And Otherwise, we would have to hire some creative graphics artist. Yeah. It was good enough for us for what we needed to use. It can generate codes.
You could say, you could say, ChatGPT, please develop my marketing plan or something along those lines, and it will, give you a plan. It will give you some language on that you can then modify to your liking. Is that fair?
Yeah, and you could be more precise. I am in this business. I have this kind of competition. I want to do digital marketing. Can you tell me what I need to do? And I'm already doing this stuff. So can you tell me something more beyond? So it's actually could be a little bit more deeper conversation you can have just instead of just a question and waiting for a response.
Oh, I'm selling whole wheat pasta and my competition are these people. How do I develop a sales plan or marketing plan? And it could, you could be more specific than that even, and it will provide you with content.
Exactly. And you can also tell I'm selling in Northeast part of the United States.
Okay. One side question. We're talking about text, I think. Is ChatGPT able to, and I'm not going to say I know how it works, but does it go out and look at images or sounds, music, and integrate that into the response it provides the user?
Yeah, so the best brains in this world on this topic of AI really believe that the future is in multimodal. And multimodal would be text, video, voice, other media, right? So the version 4 is starting to go multimodal with this image reading along with this. So you almost think, without even not worrying about this AI and technology, think just how human processes stuff, right? Yeah. We listen to somebody and we look at their face expression and then we draw conclusions, right? Based on the body language, etc. Or we hear the senses, the voice and the smell and things like that and make observations about it and modify what we say and how we say it. So in many respects, the AI, ChatGPT or similar like that would evolve to a form where it could become multimodal. Obviously, it's difficult to have senses for a computer, like smell and things like that. But it can, it can do other stuff. But it has infinite capacity to store, memorize, and process and respond. So in that sense, it truly can be like the superhuman.
Well, you work in the world of water, and let me ask: Does ChatGPT find itself operating within the world of water today? And if so, where and how?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is an industry agnostic tool in of itself, right? But it is trained on a large volume of data that includes anything in this world, includes water, okay, or space. I did a poll about a month ago when I was on a panel in Sonoma, California, and this is a audience of 200, 300 industry executives, CEOs, etc. And not many heard about ChatGPT at that time. And so I clearly think it's fairly new for the sector. And I would say its current application is limited, but the potential is unlimited moving forward. It's going to come down to, and we'll probably discuss here in the coming minutes, it's going to come down to, is there real returns that warrant an industry-specific version and contextual model? So I would say, to sum it up, I see at the moment very limited usage of its involvement in the water sector as now, but it might change in the coming years.
Well, what do you see at this stage in the life of ChatGPT? What are the applications that you might see in the world of water for ChatGPT?
Yeah, so this is where it gets exciting. for a technocrat like me or in me, but I think I have to put a practical hat on, right, as to understand the water sector and its limitations on using technology. But for example, you're doing a public hearing on raising rates, and you have a very strong reservation from the community. You can have a conversation with ChatGPT along with your leadership team saying, what is the best way to present your case? So on the table, if you are a CEO of utility and you're talking to 5 other of your leadership team members, your 6th team member is ChatGPT. And based on what that output is, you can start building a story on how to convince residents in your community for rate increase. Or let me go more technical. If you have a filamentous bacteria buildup in your wastewater treatment plant, and instead of me looking for other places, you can ask ChatGPT, how do I control this? What's the best way to manage it, right? And it'll give you a suggestion recipe and see which one really applies to you. So there's many application areas. For example, one of the very important requirement for many utilities is they're obligated to translate into various languages because of the kind of residents that are there in their community. So it can be used as a way to, and it's a kind of a next level to Google Translate, to provide a great tool that allow multiple language translations in a very conversational way to these communities. So there are exciting potential applications that I think one can explore.
And it seems to me from your examples, it can be used not necessarily in a reactive sense, but also in a proactive sense. How could I do this? Not how should I respond to the angry residents or what have you. It can be scenario-based, and you can ask it questions and it can give you a scenario-based response. Is that fair?
So yes, Matt, you're correct.
What is your thought when you see the landscape of ChatGPT today and you look at it across different sectors and businesses, and you being an entrepreneur and a leader in the world of water, when you look out 10 to 20 years and you see where ChatGPT is today with version 4.0, what do you think in 10 to 20 years? Where will ChatGPT be in the world of water in 10 to 20 years if you were to put your futurist hat on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I will also give you various examples where I believe, but also give you my reservations around it specific to water.
Okay.
So if you combine ChatGPT's power of the language model with the data model that utilities generate huge amounts of data and the models coming out of it, you can make up for a great application set. But it has to be very industry specific context. For example, who are using excessive water in you, and what is your recommendation for them to minimize their water bills and usage of water? Or which assets will fail this year? Or what is the capital investment you require next year? Right? What are the anomalies in water quality? And can you identify areas impacted for boiled water alerts? These are the questions that by combining the language model with the data models can provide a tremendous amount of safety, security application areas. That being said, the question remains is if you're going to create such industry-specific contextual models, is the industry ready to pay for it? Because this industry still heavily invests in physical infrastructure than for efficiency transformative plays. So while these are great things, it remains to be seen whether there's a good enough ROI to be able to develop these kind of application areas.
The question, I think that sometimes comes to mind, and I think you're going to get here, but when you think about the different applications it could be in the future, some people, the good news is they read books and they watch movies, and the bad news is they've read books and watched movies, and they often think about some of the potential downsides to this type of an application. They think of Orwell or Minority Report, or is this going to be like the Terminator? What are some of your thoughts on maybe some of the future downsides of something like ChatGPT, either broadly or with respect to water?
Yeah, no, certainly. There is a huge conversation in Silicon Valley for sure on the responsible AI, right? And currently, nothing is regulated around that topic. And putting an unregulated technology in a regulated industry like water is dangerous sometimes if you don't know how it can act. Now, specific to implications in water, a growing topic is environmental justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so people of color, that are on the lower end of socioeconomic spectrum are treated equally in terms of their access to clean water and treatment of wastewater. And so if the model is not trained and is biased algorithm, then it would not necessarily meet the values of the water utility CEOs. And those are the things that one has to watch for. Those are things we have to protect for.
For example, ChatGPT, who I need 5 customer service representatives. Who should I hire? And maybe it screens people in an inappropriate way. ChatGPT, where should I build my next wastewater plant, right? And it may put it in an environmental justice community, depending on how it's all programmed. Is that fair?
That's exactly right. The training data set pretty much defines what it can spit out. And listen, that's no different than who we are as humans. We are a product of the environment that we grow up in. And our biases and our like and dislikes are a direct result of the community or the family or the dinner table talks we have. So it's no different. It's same. We are in the world where we want to put equal importance to equal environmental justice, given where the world is headed. And so we want to make sure that the algorithms also have that well-trained mindset.
You touched on a few minutes ago an example where if we combine, I'll make this up, but we combine advanced metering infrastructure with ChatGPT, and it's a community that has perhaps heavy lawn irrigation. And can you see a scenario where ChatGPT is programmed where it can anticipate a user of water, violating some water conservation standards during a drought, and in a proactive way, charge them more money or restrict their consumption of water based on patterns that it can see, and do so in a way that it may be correct, it may be premature. Are there any due process violations in a sense? I mean, can you see some of those scenarios?
Yeah, see, that particular scenario you talked about, I think we can simply use, you don't need ChatGPT because there's not a whole lot of conversations you're having with it or recommendations you want. Those you can simply do it by do a threshold and then run a business rule and have it restrict the consumption or metering into that home. But where it gets powerful is where it's going through not only the data, but actually making very specific recommendations okay, on how and what that whole neighborhood consumptions are, how that can be reduced, what are the strategies to use it, etc. So if it's just a single metering and single restriction, you can probably through the technology we have today. Okay, so you have to apply in ways where you use both the power of the data model and the power of the language model together. That otherwise is not possible individually.
Yeah, it is fair, and I don't know the answer to this question, but is it fair that ChatGPT can provide answers regarding specific people or specific companies? Is that accurate?
I'm specific people. I would assume it's in terms of celebrities, famous people, big leaders. In that sense, yes.
Yeah.
Not specific individual. I don't know. I haven't actually did the search on myself and awarded response about me. Right. But about companies, yes, for sure. It would spit out what it is that that the company does. Now, this is the danger exactly you talked about, right? What if it is trained on individual personal information that somehow has been hacked or available on the net, and now you can get a profile about that individual? This is the ethical rules that you really don't want to cross. And this is where I believe is one of the big limitations at the moment is there's no value-based filtering that's going on in ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And maybe they have it. It's not visible to an average person, and the values are really important in the case of, let's say, how water utilities deal with their residents and consumers, right? Yeah. So, those are some ethical implications of untethered and unregulated space that could have negative implications.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, and I should have probably asked this at the beginning, but who owns or controls ChatGPT? And is ChatGPT just a generic term for a bunch of different similar products? And does it matter who owns it when you may be using it for applications in the world of water?
Yeah. So, this is the amazing part of America. It was actually defined as a research organization. There's a bunch of amazingly smart people that want to further this science. They published a great amount of articles. So any strong tech person, tech savvy can actually use those models to contextualize. But the beauty of what they did is they trained it on the world data set. But it is at the moment primarily dominated by Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And it does matter who owns it because if it has direct implications to us as humans and has both positive and negative potential for use of the technology, it does matters, and we have to be very careful about it. But the custom models of ChatGPT trained on wrong data sets could potentially be a huge threat for humans. And we saw a case the other day where, at least I heard through the news anyway, that how ChatGPT through Bing search gave an advice to divorce a woman from her husband or the other way around. And, that's in a very confrontational way. And those are the things we still learning from.
It wasn't Tom Brady, was it? I'm kidding. Well, you touched on something that piqued my interest. Let's say 10 years from now, we're talking about ChatGPT. And if I said, I'll try and figure out how to ask this the best way, but is in 10 years, if someone said ChatGPT is the source of truth, what's your reaction to that?
I would. I'm a traditionalist. I still believe the power of human critical thinking. Okay. So what I would do is, in my case, since they're very specific questions to me, right, and how I would perceive it, I would consider ChatGPT as a huge knowledge of information and a bot that I can, get quick suggestions, discussions going. But I would apply my critical thinking filter based on how I believe in to ultimately decide a conversation. For example, in preparation for this podcast, I asked a bunch of questions to ChatGPT about ChatGPT itself, right? Yeah. And it spitted out a bunch of answers for me. And I looked through it and I said, I didn't believe half of this. I was going to put my own filter on what I believe, right, its role. So in my case, and I believe probably in many other cases, that human critical thinking is essential, but it's a great addition to improve the power of human critical thinking by giving some baseline conversational base.
Yeah. It seems to me it may connect back to your thoughts on the ethical implications of ChatGPT. And if I hear you correctly, it's not to replace human rationality or critical thinking. It's to maybe supplement it or maybe even amplify it. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, amplify is a real word for me, because every day in my role, I'm looking for ways to be not only efficient, but use my critical brain for unsolved problems, right? And if there's stuff that can allow me to give that opening and space, then I would like to utilize my brain for that instead of just doing, repeated menial work or things that somebody else can think about. And in this case, ChatGPT can think more than I can. So why not utilize it?
Yeah. You've touched on a few things that lead me to this next question. With all the concerns over how it's applied in the world of water, and, is ChatGPT a source of truth, and some of the maybe ethical implications you raised, environmental justice implications, your thoughts in the future of, where regulators may be on ChatGPT, federal, state, local. This is kind of maybe a Wild West, but where do you see in 10 years, 20 years, where are regulators going to be on ChatGPT?
Oh, they absolutely have to come to grips with this tech. And this is a huge conversation in general, is the knowledge of policymakers, politicians, to keep up with the pace at which technology is growing, and to understand its beneficial use and misuse, and craft policies in a way that its misuse is limited or totally shut down, and beneficial use is maximized. So, as it pertains to water, if that's one of the contexts here for discussion, accuracy and reliability of info to the residents is essential. If it is portraying wrong information about, water and the impact of public health in a community, it can create chaos, concerns among the residents and businesses in that area. So we have to make sure that it's not used, or it's not trained, or it's not misinformed based on what might be going on. So in those sense, I think we're going to be extra cautious, I suppose, and the regulators have to come to grips with the limitations of this technology.
Yeah, I can see, asking ChatGPT, how do I get a 10% return on equity from the regulatory commission, or even applications of ChatGPT, how do I just run my water plant or my wastewater plant? And then if I'm a regulator, whether it's the economic regulator or an environmental regulator, what are the legal ramifications of using ChatGPT to own and operate a water system? What's the liability if something happens? Is ChatGPT perfect? And if not, what is the liability for users of ChatGPT when they deploy it to make decisions when it comes to water? As you point out, it's you ingest it. It's public health, and there are serious outcomes when you don't get that right. Those are just some things on my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's that problem has been solved, right? So we have a lot of advisory systems today, technology-wise, but it would only advise, and it would still, in fine print, would say, well, it's up to you ultimately if you want to take this advice or not. Look at pharmaceutical drugs, right? In the advertisement, for 2 minutes, complete 60 seconds devoted about all the negative effects of that medicine, right?
Yeah.
So I think that can be handled. The key here is that the operator licenses and have to be made sure that they are still pertaining to the purity of what an operator does, and it doesn't depend on ChatGPT's approach of running a plant. And listen, we've seen this already in colleges, right? Colleges are rejecting today the responses of the codes that are being built by ChatGPT as part of their exams and final submissions.
Yeah.
So I believe it'll play itself out in that space, and it will be protected in that sense.
Yeah. I just didn't know if there was a viable scenario in 10 to 20 years where ChatGPT ends up, operating plants. And that may be utopian for some people. That may be dystopian for some people. But, could ChatGPT become HAL, and start running things? And we trust it, much like a autopilot. But is that a possible or plausible or simply just a preposterous scenario in your mind? No. So ChatGPT itself cannot run the plant. I think the plant part is an automation topic. Okay. Yeah.
And the automation has to be coupled with a large language model like ChatGPT to be able to have conversations about, and that should somehow link to an automation of the plant in a way that it becomes bidirectional. So you say, my influence is going to be this today. So change the settings of your automation of the plant to a wet weather day. And can you give me life? So it has to be connected with an automation of the plant. So I do believe a scenario like that could exist in the future, where you take a language model and combine with an automation model and to drive a plant. It's going to come down to if the industry is ready for it. So I'll give you right now, many plants, the operators still don't want to give it away, their control on the plant.
Yeah.
Okay. Or when they can turn on switches and knobs, etc. Then we also offer advisory systems today. As Aquasight, we offer a lot of advisory systems that gives us the guidance, right? And they can use that to supplement the way they run the plant. The next is automation, right? The next is AI-driven automation. And then the next one really is when you do AI-driven automation combined with a language model like ChatGPT. That's ultimately the scenario you're talking about, right? You're just having conversations and you're changing complete automation setups, etc.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna. I I don't know. There's obviously a scenario. There's obviously a test case we can put together. But it would be an exciting future if one were to come in that direction. Okay. And we are seeing it in autonomous cars today.
Yeah.
Autonomous cars is exactly doing that, right?
Yeah.
Game changer.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm going. My sort of presupposition, you unpacked it, and, with real-time information and sensors, and it becomes, ChatGPT is almost like the brain or the hands, where a human doesn't need to speak into it and ask it questions. It's simply receiving real-time or near real-time information, and it's sort of asking and answering its own questions and making adjustments as it goes, much like your example of the autonomous vehicle. There's a car ahead, I better slow down or pass it. I know that's not necessarily going in the most perfect way, accidents and things like that, but I think we both agree that it is a possible or plausible scenario in the future. It's just kind of either scary or exciting to see whether that will come to fruition, and if so, how. I think that's something that everyone will think about, regulators as well as the users. For example, could ChatGPT pass an operator's exam and be qualified to run a plant? What does that mean, right? I think we're touching on this, but I'll ask it directly. These innovations are often met with much praise and much anticipation, and rightfully so. But are there any unintended consequences of just moving forward with ChatGPT in the world of water? Are there things that we're just not really considering that we may have some negative or maybe even some positive unanticipated consequences that we may not be talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic case. We don't know what we don't know yet, right? As I mentioned, for every technology, there's beneficial use and misuse. But I can tell you, there's, things like phishing emails that are written by ChatGPT that looks exactly like they're coming from a utility. Okay, much smarter, much more contextual, much more precise.
Yeah.
That's a danger, or misinformation to the residents that can scare and misinform about their water and create a whole kind of chaos. Potential to displace roles or jobs, which I'm a little less concerned about because, as such, this industry is losing a lot of people because they're all retiring and not new people are coming into these kind of roles. So I'm less concerned about that. But these phishing and misinformation, malicious intent, those are the ones we really should be concerned about. And it's a very vulnerable sector because they're not high level of sophisticated users, and every utility has really good intentions and still not totally, in tune with the cybersecurity threats and other natures. So whether it's a resident, whether it's for utility, we have to be very, very careful of potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah. You've talked a bit about this, but I wanted to make sure we fully addressed your views on the ethical implications of using ChatGPT. You've mentioned several concerns with that, but is there anything else on the ethical side of ChatGPT that we need to think about as we look to the future?
Yeah, I mean, the key to me is the values of water, value-based system of the water utilities, right? And is the discussions or conversations with ChatGPT filter through a set of values. Of course, you can specify the value, and it'll probably give you a discussion within that context. But the two major concerns for me, which I partly mentioned before, is biased algorithms that could go against what the water sector believes in, and second is values based algorithms that might be counter to what the water sector believes in. So if we have to avoid these things or filter it through a human critical thinking before you leverage ChatGPT in your lives or utility businesses.
Yeah. Values and beliefs. In the next 10 to 20 years, do you see those two elements being static or dynamic? What happens if the underlying values and beliefs upon which ChatGPT is based changes? What happens? Who gets to decide on those values and judgments? And is there a forum for debate and discussion? Your thoughts on how that might unfold in the future?
Listen, I mean, that's a really good question. And the people who are behind this, the people who are training and building these models, okay, are at the heart of this at the moment, right? So it's like you're building a house, but the builders might be different than the people who live in the house, right? And if it's not built in the way that people who live in the house, can feel safe and secured, then it's problematic, right? So I think the builders are deeply thinking about this topic, and I hope they're thinking in ways they can implement it. And in terms of rules and regulations, at the moment, it's self-regulated by the inventors and their belief system.
Yeah.
Right. The question is there a role for debate on the boundaries and what the limitations should be?
Yeah.
And I think it's an open topic. It's up for debate. It's too new of a topic to be able to already have conclusions on this. But the good news is the builders are actually talking about this proactively. So they don't have, bad intent to start with. Yeah.
It seems that I'll take your analogy further, but it seems that the builders are building, but they're building based upon the plans and specifications of the architects. And there seems to me, if I hear you correctly, a conversation now between the builders and the architects. The builders are building and they're saying, I can sort of do this, but I see problems with the electricity, the roofing, the foundation, the water and sewer. And they're going back and talking to the architects and saying, we are concerned about the values and the beliefs under which we are building based upon the type of architecture you've handed us. And that is a conversation you see going on right now and perhaps over the next 10 to 20 years. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I believe that the builders know a whole lot about it than we do. Yeah. Okay. And they've already seen perhaps negative implications of this. Okay. So there are things happening behind that it's hard for us to know because there's some amazing group of people and team behind all this powerful stuff. And maybe that's the reason why they're openly talking about it, wanting to make sure there's limits to what this can do and should do. Yeah. Because we don't want this to be an existential threat to mankind that is unchecked. I don't think even the builders want it. So that's what we need to think about.
If I can say, this may be a bad way to put it, but if ChatGPT is like a toothbrush and I want to buy a toothbrush and I don't really like the current ChatGPT, I want to build my own toothbrush, right? That serves my purposes, that has the values and beliefs that I want. Can I build my own ChatGPT that has the values and beliefs upon which I want to build my own business or solutions? Is that a fair? Did I say that fairly?
Yeah, absolutely. Because all the work behind ChatGPT is out there in the research papers, right? And if it's no different than a James Bond movie, right? Mm-hmm. A bad guy with a lot of money builds a powerful, customized, bacteria or virus that would spread through the world, right?
Yeah.
And so anybody with bad intentions, a lot of money, because you need the money to build the models and the computing power, etc., could do harm. And so we've seen that story in the movies for sure. And so these models can be really built, right? And it obviously is a threat we have, and we know not everybody has good intentions in this world. We know that historically. Yeah. So there are good people and bad people, and we just have to make sure that the tech doesn't go in bad hands.
So if I'm a water utility or some other water-focused organization, I can say, I've heard about this ChatGPT version or model or vendor. I don't like the underlying values, beliefs, assumptions. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hire my own programmer, and he or she's going to build my own type of ChatGPT, and I'm going to use that to run my business. That could happen.
Yeah, it can happen. I will tell you my huge reservation about the water sector as a whole is that this is expensive stuff, and some world's best talent and the best digital infrastructure is required. And the water sector, I know within my own business what it took for us to get 100 to 100, 120 communities in the last 7 years, that I don't believe that the water sector is at this moment willing to pay, right?
Yeah.
For an investment that's made that's very contextual within their sector, right? It might change because all of a sudden, if we all believe 10 years from now that the value of water should be 3 times what it is today, then all of a sudden there's a buying power for these utilities to spend on all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, but somebody has to spend hundreds of millions to create a context-specific model that applies to the sector and should expect no return for the next 20 years. That's a person that might succeed, but then who's going to pay hundreds of millions without any return expectations?
Sounds like a conversation you need to have with an investor.
Yeah, or somebody higher up that want to do greater good, but don't want any return. But that's exactly how ChatGPT got formed, right? Research organization that spent billions, and now Microsoft put in 10 billion, right? After what they've seen, but we're talking billions here.
Yeah.
To develop a technology like this.
Well, it seems that you're saying it's possible, but maybe a challenge to see a future in 10 to 20 years where there's multiple ChatGPT platforms with different underlying beliefs and values. I think I'm saying that correctly. You're saying there's a very steep barrier to market entry to do that.
Yeah. Listen, there's a whole space now of generative language models, and there's a lot of this is like a wild west, like what America was in early 1900s with 100+ car manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
And only 2 or 3 survived. Actually, 2 survived that are truly American manufacturers now. So I believe it's going to weed itself out. But the jury is out there. We don't know which way the scenario is going to pan out. But for sure, we're going to see a few big players and maybe a few emerging players. But that would disrupt the big players.
So overall, you are... you have a very positive view of how ChatGPT can play within the world of water and help organizations in the world of water become better, more effective, more efficient, and serve their customers in a better way. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, I'm bullish on this topic because of the potential it has to transform the utility business. I believe if it's properly integrated, done, and understood, they could hugely benefit from it. But there are boundaries, and we have to define what those boundaries are so that it is not misused. Because like any technology, if it creates great damage in the first 6 months, you're going to have a hard time recovering from it. So if you really want to leverage it, let's define the boundaries now, and let's make this to work for betterment of the water sector, and that ultimately serves the public and the residents and the businesses.
Well, Mahesh, I want to thank you for being a guest today on the Water Foresight Podcast. I look forward to having you back to talk about many other topics that are of great importance to the world of water. And certainly, I will keep my eyes and ears peeled for advances and innovations in this world of ChatGPT. Mahesh, tell the listeners where they can get a hold of you and email, website.
Mahesh, MAHESH at Aquasight, AQUASIGHT.io. And as far as website is concerned, it's aquasight.io. And you're welcome to check us out and check what we do and see if there's any problem that you have that can be resolved with what we do.
Thank you for listening to the Water Foresight Podcast powered by the Aqualaris Group. For more information, please visit us at aqualaris.com or follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.